Hi everyone, my name is David Montague. I'm the president of the Down East Lakes Land Trust. I'm also a registered Maine guide and a wildlife biologist, and we're going to talk today about some winter tracking in snow. And this is a great activity that you can do in your own backyard. You can find all kinds of things that you would never see during the daytime, and it's a lot of fun to see what's been moving through the area. So let's take a walk and we'll see what we can find. Okay, so we've only been going for a few minutes and already we found something pretty neat here. We're in a stand of softwood that has a pretty good canopy cover, and there's just trails of tracks all through here. And if you look at them, you can see that they're hoof-shaped tracks. They have two lobes to them, they're cloven-hoofed, and right here we have a point where some of these trails come together, and we've got this low depression. And it's got some fresh snow in it, so it hasn't been used lately, but this is evidence of a deer bed. So a deer has actually bedded down here for a sleep or a nap, and there's probably more of them scattered throughout these trees. This is a good sheltered place for them, and we can tell based on the size of it that it's likely a deer, given our knowledge of the animals that are in this area. You can also find moose beds that of course are much larger, and if we had any question we can also tell because there's a great big deer track right in the middle here, and hopefully you can see down in there it's got like I said, two lobes of the hoof, and you might be able to see the impression of the two dew claws behind those lobes. So here are some more signs of deer, and again, tracking is not just about looking at the tracks, we're looking at all the different signs that an animal leaves behind. So here, once again, we have a trail of well-established deer tracks, and right here in the middle, we have some droppings. And you can see that there is some snow, some fresh snow on top of these, so they're not real fresh, but they're kind of about the size of a lima bean. They are a little bit elongated in shape, and they have kind of a sawdust texture to them as they start to break apart. So once again, if you had tracks that you couldn't identify but you were following a trail through the snow and you found something like this, that's a good sign that you're tracking a deer. Okay, so here we found some really tiny tracks and they're very faint, so hopefully you can make these out. We've got a quarter here for reference. They're a little bit longer than the quarter, and you can see that there are splayed fingers and toes. There's kind of a thumb that comes out on the side of each one, and these are squirrel tracks from a red squirrel. We can tell that by the shape of the track, the approximate size of them, and just our general knowledge of the species that are found here. If you have gray squirrels, they're going to look very similar but slightly larger. If you have chipmunk tracks, they're going to be very similar but just a little bit smaller. And if we look up the hill here, we can see where this same squirrel got into some deeper snow. And here you can see this drag pattern. These are pretty fresh. So the hind feet have been dragged through the snow, and in some places you can see a gap between the tracks of a foot and a half or 2 feet. That's where the squirrel was jumping from one spot to the next. And if you get a good look at all four tracks, you'll have the two front paws in the middle, and they'll look a little bit like human hands, about round in shape. And you'll have the back legs splayed slightly and out to the sides. They'll have kind of those fingers and toes up front, and then they'll have a longer foot pad behind it. Okay, here we found another really common track that you're likely to find in your own yards or anytime that you're closer to town. Down here, we have a pretty good dog track. It's a little bit degraded. We've got the quarter there for scale, but what we're seeing is a triangular pad back here, and then we've got 4 toes, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we can see pretty clearly that there are little claw marks out at the tip here. And we can tell that this is a dog. We can tell that it's, you know, in the sort of carnivore realm because of that general shape. We can narrow it down to being some type of canine because we have the claws visible. If this was a cat, we likely would not see those claws because they're retractable. And in the case of telling a dog from a fox or from a coyote, this is pretty large, too large to be a fox, and it's pretty wide. It's almost as wide as it is long. And a coyote is generally going to have a narrower track. And we can also guess that it's probably a dog because we're pretty close to town here. You can see some of the roofs through the trees. So we're close to where people are walking dogs, we're close to backyards, and so very likely a domestic dog. If this were a cat, the track would be more round and it would not have those claws visible. And so then we would have to decide whether it was a house cat or a bobcat or a lynx. And that's largely going to come down to size and just clues that we can get from looking at the habitat in the area around the track. Okay, so we're right here on the side of the road, which is actually not a bad place to look for tracks because the snow is very thin and we've got a really fresh skimming of fresh snow on it. And we have a track here that may be common in a lot of areas. It's not real common around Grand Lake Stream. These are turkey tracks. And they're pretty large. You can see they're not quite as big as my hand, but you have 3 toes that are splayed out. And in some cases you might see a little bit of an indentation going to the back as well. And that's going to be basically the same shape that you would have for a chicken track. If this was a duck or a goose track, you would actually see the webbing in between those toes. But given the size and given the shape of it, we can be pretty confident that this is a turkey in this case. And usually where you find one, you'll find lots of turkey tracks. And that's the case here. We can see where they just went right down the side of the road here on Shaw Street in Grand Lake Stream. Okay, here we've got some really faint, small rodent tracks. This is probably a vole, but we can't see them clearly enough to be sure. But what makes me think vole is that it burst out from underneath the snow right here. It traveled across the surface and it burrowed right back down. So these voles will create what are called subnivean pathways, tunnels that run underneath the snow right down at ground level. And they'll have those all through this area, a whole network of them, so that they can stay away from predators and never have to come up on the surface. And when there's a good crust, they're really well protected. But a lot of predators have figured that out, and they'll go right through the snow when they hear a vole down there. Crossing these, we have some little tracks. We have a pair here, and a pair here, and another pair over here. And that's a good indication, based on the size, that we probably got some sort of mouse here, likely a deer mouse in this case. And they're just hopping right across the surface. Okay, so that's our tracking adventure for today, and I hope you had a good time. This is a great time of year to be out in the woods, a great time to be trying your hand at some tracking. So get out there when you've got some fresh snow and see what you can find, and tell us about it. Be sure to send us a message on Facebook or Instagram and tell us about your tracking experience.